Those who are just joining us right about now, many thanks for getting on board. Time for Take Note, 20 years of defending human rights defenders in Africa. I'll be introducing my guest very shortly, but in our preamble, for 2 decades, DefendDefenders has been at the front line of protecting human rights defenders across Africa who risk their safety to uphold justice and dignity for others. Guided by its vision of a region where the human rights of every citizen are respected and upheld, DefendDefenders works to protect, strengthen, and amplify the voices of human rights defenders through advocacy, capacity building, regional as well as international partnerships. As Africa's democracies, including Uganda, face major tests, DefendDefenders marks 20 years of defending the defenders. And this morning we are speaking to Estella Kansiime, the Advocacy Research and Communications Manager at DefendDefenders, to reflect on the organization's journey, impact, and the future of human rights defense on the continent. You're most welcome to the program, Madam Estella Kansiime.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Great. Tell us first about DefendDefenders.
Thank you. First of all, it's an exciting week for us. We celebrate 20 years of great impact on the African continent. But briefly, DefendDefenders, also known as the East and Horn of Africa Human Rights Defenders Project, was established in 2005 by Hassan Shire, who is our founder, and who at the time was also an exiled human rights defender fleeing his home country in Somalia because of persecution. The kind of work that we do is centered around protecting human rights defenders. We'll briefly get into who a human rights defender is, but our mission is to enhance the safety, the resilience and protection of human rights defenders on the continent to ensure that they can effectively carry out their work. So briefly, what does our protection work look like? Because you asked how this kind of work is carried out on a day-to-day basis. So our protection work is categorized as both emergency and also preventive. The emergency component of the protection work looks to respond to the threat that the human rights defender is facing in the course of carrying out their work, with the purpose of removing them from that threat and bringing them to a place of safety so that they can be able to continue their work. I'll briefly give examples of what this emergency response looks like, but then the preventive arm of the organization's work is also to equip the human rights defenders with the right skills to be able to mitigate the risks that they face in the course of their work. So the emergency response will, of course, be determined by the case of each human rights defender. We do not have a one-size-fits-all approach, but every case is determined on its merit. But this support would range from medical support, legal support, educational grants, psychosocial support, relocation from one city to a safer city, and sometimes from one country to another country, depending again on the case of each human rights defender.
You said the organization was founded in 2005. Now, there must have been critical challenges that, of course, led to Mr. Shire opting to galvanize support in order to create the organization. And as it has evolved, the realities of your work have changed. I do not know whether what challenges were there in 2005 are pretty much the same you're still facing, or the realities have completely changed.
Allow me to start by saying that this organization was founded after extensive research was conducted by Mr. Hassan Shire to look into the protection challenges of human rights defenders. And at that time, key challenges that were identified included limited collaboration amongst states in terms of meeting the protection needs of human rights defenders. The research also found out that there were capacity gaps in terms of the skills that human rights defenders possessed to be able to conduct their work, and there were also resource constraints in terms of supporting them to be able to do their work. So when the organization was founded, it was to meet these challenges and these findings that the research was able to reveal. And we've seen since then some of these challenges continue to be displayed. Okay, so the organization has evolved over the years to respond. As I said initially, how do we respond? Through our protection intervention. We have also advocacy initiatives, so we work to amplify the voices of human rights defenders on the continent, both at the regional level and the international and the international level. At the regional level, we work very closely with the African Union human rights institutions. Key of these is the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And at the international level, we work very closely with the United Nations human rights system, particularly the United Nations Human Rights Council. Of course, we also have a capacity building component, as I said initially, that our work is also preventive in nature, looking to equip and skill human rights defenders with the right skills to be able to conduct their work. Our capacity building arm of the institution looks at both digital tools and digital skills, how our human rights defenders are able to keep up with the evolving technology, how safe are they as they conduct their work with their equipment, but also in terms of physical trainings, in terms of supporting them to be able to mitigate the risks that they could face in the course of their work.
Okay, I'm glad you've very ably put it to us exactly who a human rights defender is. But I just want us to dig a little bit into a human rights defender is a protector.
Yeah.
But he or she also needs a protector. I don't know where the overlap happens, or if at all you face challenges where you can't defend the human rights defender. What happens at that point?
Okay, I think it's important for us to start with understanding who is a human rights defender. Not just for us here in the studio, but also for the public and the audience at large. A human rights defender is defined as anyone who individually or in association with others works to protect and promote human rights. Human rights are, I'll briefly say, are entitlements that we as human beings receive by virtue of being a human. And these entitlements are laid out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So human rights defenders are anyone, it could be an individual, it could be an organization, provided you're working to protect these human rights that have been identified and set apart. Okay? So from that perspective, I would like to give key examples of who a human rights defender could be. We should remember that it's your action that defines whether or not you are a human rights defender. I'll give an example of a journalist, okay? An investigative journalist that works to reveal perhaps the status of corruption in a country, the status of the access to to medical services, as a journalist that works to maybe expose the rights, the status of the enjoyment of rights in a particular country, right? So a human rights defender, in the course of protecting the right to free expression and access to information, and also bringing information to the people, becomes a human rights defender by course of that work, right? Then we also have ordinary citizens, for instance, who gather on the streets to protest against maybe the state of affairs, okay? So protesters in that action, working to amplify maybe through protests, speaking up against a particular situation, maybe a violation of the right to life. As they perform that particular duty, they are then categorized as human rights defenders. So it's important to note that it is the action that defines who a human rights defender is. And that action should be in the defense of human rights as we know them.
Okay. Now, Uganda does provide sanctuary to many human rights defenders from across the continent. Many times when they are here, they do require support. How is that undertaken?
Okay. First of all, we would like to appreciate the government of Uganda for providing that sanctuary to many exiled human rights defenders. Statistics show us that the country is currently hosting over 1.8 million refugees, making it the largest African country that is hosting refugees. Amongst these refugees, of course, are human rights defenders who are fleeing the hostile environment from their countries. We have many exiled human rights defenders from Sudan, from South Sudan, from the DRC, of course, given the condition and the circumstances that are prevailing in those states. So the response, as I had originally stated in my first question, again would be determined by the case of each human rights defender. But key to note is many of these exiled human rights defenders are facing issues of trauma, mental well-being challenges. So that is one key area that we also respond. We offer them psycho-social support. We do offer family support as well. When they are in exile, sometimes they do need daily support to meet the costs of living, you know, communication, things like educational grants for them to be able to conduct for them to be able to learn the language and be able to relate in the country. But also, DefendDefenders, we have what we call a resource center. This is simply a space that we have equipped with computers, with access to internet. It's a safe space. So these human rights defenders in exile can come to our resource center and be able to continue their work. The essence is that they continue to remain effective and but in a safe environment. Space. Yes.
Okay, that is it's good impact, and of course demonstrates much of the support that is ongoing. Now, there has been a shift in donor priorities, and many organizations continue to grapple with the ability to galvanize funds quickly. How does DefendDefenders meet this particular challenge?
That's a good question. We have seen this shift, over the last couple of years, but it has intensified this year. We've seen the support that was coming into human rights defenders and civil society was predominantly from our friends from the Global North, our development partners. But as we see the shifting priorities globally, we see these development partners are also starting to look inwardly. Their support is going towards security, towards enhancing national security, towards business enterprises and economic interests. So we've seen the funding that has been allocated, that initially was allocated to supporting human rights defenders on the continent, dwindling, okay? So we have seen civil society or human rights defenders feel that impact, in terms of being able to implement their programs and also to be able to support the work of protecting human rights. So it's important for human rights defenders also to rethink the strategies at national level, right? We also have to, I think that's why it's important for the public to understand who a human rights defender is, because when you understand the concept, then you are able to defend it. You're able also to then to work towards strengthening their work. So it's important for us to look inwardly. How can we mobilize resources at national level? Who are the existing, for instance, philanthropists at national level that can support the work of human rights defenders? What more can we do to amplify this work that it can be able to garner support at the national level? So those are the strategies we are starting to rethink as donor priorities shift of recent. Thank you.
And now, as the digital security threats continue to roll out, many of the people that are working based on these platforms do find difficulties, and it's also one of the factors that are leading to the shrinking civic space across Africa. Sustainability must be something you're thinking about, especially to be able to stay doing your work. How are you doing that?
So when you talk about, your question raises two issues. First, you talk about the digital era and the digital threats to human rights defenders. This is very critical, and initially when I was speaking about the arms of the institution, we have a fully fledged technology component, okay, department of the institution. And the purpose of this department is to look into, as you said, the digital challenges. How else can we empower our human rights defenders to be able to carry out their work effectively using their gadgets? Are their gadgets safe? Okay, things like how safe are your passwords? How do you store data? Right. How do you make sure that the information that you've stored is credible? Things like how do you access your information? How do you ensure that the data that you have saved, for instance, on your laptop is safe and cannot be compromised? So we have also gone on to develop particular programs, digital programs that support human rights defenders, and key of the categories that we have identified that need this sort of support is women human rights defenders. So we run a particular digital enhancement or protection program for women human rights defenders to empower them to be able to do their work digitally in a safe space, but also as they receive this information, they're also able to take it back home and be able also to empower other women human rights defenders. Then the other component that you asked was on sustainability, right? And this is a key question. It's not just DefendDefenders that is asking itself, but I think it's also a question that human rights defenders and other civil society institutions must ask themselves, especially in a context where we see shifting priorities. We no longer have resources coming in as they used to from our development partners from the global north. So again, I like to emphasize the need, first of all, to think inwardly, okay, to strengthen our national resources, to be to innovative in the way that we do our work. We see the rise of AI. How are we tapping into artificial intelligence, for instance? How are we consistently re-innovating ourselves to be relevant also, but also to meet the needs of the people? How are we responding as human rights defenders to the attacks on enjoyment of human rights? So again, the question is to look inwardly, strengthen national resources, map out potential funders inwardly. Who are the existing philanthropists? Who can support our work? How can the public be brought on board to be able to acknowledge our work and to also be able to defend our work? Okay. I think maybe before I proceed to the next question, I think it's also to note that human rights defenders usually point to the condition or the status of democracy in a country, okay? When you see human rights defenders start to speak up, for instance, against the violations of the right to free expression, the violations of the right to protest peacefully, this should also point to signals on the attack, for instance, on democracy. It could also point to the state of civic space in a particular country. So it's important for the public to understand that these human rights defenders are speaking for us. They are showing us the dangers our nations are facing. They are showing us the dangers the people are facing in terms of realizing their human rights. Okay,
before we came on air, I saw a promo of an upcoming high-level panel that is happening in Kampala. Yes. I think it's part of the one of the initiatives that you're undertaking. Tell us about that and how you intend to push through, especially when it comes to achieving your objectives.
Yeah, initially, as I said, this is a very exciting week for us. We are celebrating 20 years of impactful work, ensuring human rights defenders on the continent continue to be able to do their work safely and effectively. And tomorrow, broadcast live on NTV at from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. We'll be having a high-level panel conversation with global human rights experts that will look into some of the issues that we have discussed. I encourage all our viewers to tune in tomorrow. We'll be exploring the challenges that human rights defenders continue to face. We'll also be exploring the shifting priorities. How can we reimagine the safety and resilience of human rights defenders in the years to come? We have experts from the United Nations human rights system joining us. We have also experts from the continent. We'll also be sharing experience from regional human rights defenders. And our executive director, Mr. Hassan Shir, will be moderating that conversation. So I encourage viewers to tune in tomorrow and be part of this great conversation.
Wow, thank you very much. Now, 20 years is amazing to still be doing good work. Somebody will be compelled to ask, what is the vision for the next 20 years?
Good question. The vision remains to see a continent within which the rights of every individual, as stipulated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, respected and upheld. We're looking to see a safer continent. We're looking to see more resilient human rights defenders. But again, this is determined by the context and the strategies that each human rights defender can be able to create or be able to innovate, to be able to meet the needs at that time. So we're looking for a safer continent. We're looking for a continent where rights as established in the international and regional human rights standards are respected and upheld.
Okay. I'm glad as you end, you speak about international standards. There is an aspect about United Nations Human Rights Council and the African Commission on human and people's rights. How is the engagement there? Very lastly.
Thank you. That's a very good question. So as DefendDefenders, since we were established, we have worked to bridge that relationship between the regional and international human rights mechanisms. So we have consistently engaged with the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, as well as the United Nations Human Rights Council. How do we do this? First of all, we work to expose our human rights defenders to these platforms. Human rights defenders need to be aware of existing mechanisms to protect their rights beyond national systems. So we support human rights defenders to engage these mechanisms, engage the experts that work with these mechanisms, support the development of resolutions and outcomes that these mechanisms do put out. So we have consistently, since 2009 and 2012, worked with the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and also the United Nations Human Rights Council to be able to respond to the challenges of human rights defenders. And key to note, because of our continuous advocacy, of course, we do not work in isolation. We work with partners both at regional and international level. We've been able to push and influence, for instance, the United Nations Human Rights Council to respond, for instance, to the situation in Sudan. The Human Rights Council did establish a fact-finding mission to monitor, document, and report on the human rights violations that have been committed in the country since April 2023. So we continue to push for that engagement, to expose human rights defenders to this system, and also show them that beyond their national boundaries, there are opportunities that exist both at the regional and international level that they can be able to explore to be able to meet the challenges that they face in the course of their work.
Okay, thank you very much. Estella Kansiime, Advocacy Research and Communications Manager at DefendDefenders, for that insight into the works of your organization, and congratulations on 20 years of work. We do wish you the very best as you celebrate tomorrow, and indeed look forward to the next 20 years of defending the human rights defenders. That will do it for our Take Note.